So why is pricing so important? Let's have a look at this chart. These are questions ranked on a 1 less important to 5 most important in top executives' minds as to what is their most important or a high pressure problem. Look at price. The price of consumer goods and the price of industrial goods and of services rank at the top. So one of the reasons as to why we should spend some time in pricing is because it's one of the marketing variables or marketing challenges that is at the top of executives' minds. Now you may ask, why do they consider pricing to be such a high pressure problem? Well, the answer is here. This is a study based on an average of something around 2,500 companies from the CompuStat Aggregate Index, whereby we can see on average what will happen to a 1% increase or improvement in price in comparison to some other variables that make up the income statement and what their relative impact is of that improvement on the bottom line. Let's look at the variable cost. A reduction in variable cost of 1% will improve your net income in approximately 7.8%. An increase in volume approximately will improve about half as much, 3.3%, and reducing fixed costs will improve your bottom line 2.3%. What do you think the impact of price is on the net income of a company? You guessed right. Price is the most important variable affecting the income statement. A 1% improve in price will affect on the aggregate for these 2,500 companies approximately 11% your bottom line results. So since it is such a high pressure problem because it has a tremendous impact on your bottom line results, let's look how much executives know. How do they rate that they know, or what do they know about pricing? And as you can see, once we take into account cost, variable cost, fixed cost, and competitive prices, and then product value to customers and price response, only somewhere between 30% and 60% of top managers seem to claim that they are well informed about these two fundamental variables. So, given that price is so important and that top executives seems to be relatively uninformed or not as well informed about this fundamental variable, let's go and try to review how you should think about setting up prices for your products or services. So before we can speak about prices, we have to understand a thing or two about costs. There are 3 important costs that we need to take into account. First of all is the variable cost. Let's take the case as an example for a hotel, for example. The variable cost is the one that truly depends on the level of activity, right? So if you're going to rent an extra room, what you really want to determine is what is the extra cost of renting that room to try to be able to determine at what's the minimum price at which I can actually be able to sell the room for the night, right? So the variable cost or the variable activity might be the time of the person cleaning the room, or might be the supplies that are needed to clean the room, or the cost of switching the linens or the bathroom toiletries, etc., etc., right? So those are costs that actually depend on the level of activity and that are specific to that one additional room. On the other hand, there are semi-fixed costs. These costs only scale in steps. So, for example, employees might be a semi-fixed cost because, for example, you might operate the hotel with a certain set of people during the low season, say in the winter, versus a different set of people in the summer, where the activity of the hotel climbs up to a different level of activity. And on the other hand, there are fixed costs, and those are costs that do not vary by the level of activity. So, for example, if you're not the owner of the hotel property, for example, the rent might be an example of a fixed cost. Costs that that stay the same regardless of whether you rent or you don't rent the additional room. 2 important other concepts are those of contribution or contribution margin. First of all, there is the unit contribution margin, which we will denominate CM over here, which is fundamentally the difference between the unit price minus the variable cost of the good sold. And the other one is the total contribution margin, which is the number of units that you have sold times the unit contribution margin. These 2 concepts are very important to what's going to come next. Now that we have understood the 3 kinds of costs and contribution margins, let's try to understand what the break-even point is. Oftentimes, a measure of the level of profitability of a company can be expressed as the difference between the total contribution margin and the fixed cost. In order to illustrate that, let's see how this applies and how to estimate the break-even point.